Hello guys, welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and this message, it comes from a translation of a message that I received, and the message reads like this. Hello Brother Nashi, can you please post for me? When you post my story, please post my story as hidden identity. I have my own confession that I want to share with you. In our family, what happens is that each and every year, like in January, when these things happen, it always happens in January. Whenever the rats that were used by my father, they require blood. When they want that blood, then the blood will be taken from any of my blood relatives. These spiritual rats were given to me as per the instruction that was given to my mother by my late father just prior to the days that he died. So these rats, it is not like they want the blood each and every year, but whenever they want the blood, then they will want you to sacrifice any of your relatives. Just before the passing away of my father, he started then with the preparations of me inheriting his estate, which was in form of these spiritual rats, so that I can continue with his work that he was doing when he was still alive. My father, he used to work for this other white man. When that white man that he was working for left Zim, then my father was given this other particular metallic trunk, because after that white man had returned back to Britain, then my father was left without a job, so he was struggling to raise his family. He then started visiting a lot of herbalists. That was when my father was given those spiritual rats. From the way that I had when my mother was telling me this history, my mother told me that our father, after he had been given these spiritual rats, what they used to do is that when it will be time when people in the village will be planting their crops, then my father would send those rats to go into the fields and steal whatever seeds that would have been planted by his neighbors. After they had stolen those seeds, then they would return with those seeds back to my father. So each and every year, my father used to harvest a lot, even if he would have cultivated just a small portion. But each and every year, my father was the one who was harvesting a lot from his small farm. So my father, when he was about to die, that was when he asked my mom that I was the one who was supposed to continue with the work that he was doing when he was still alive. When my father was still alive at that time, after I had left home, I was now staying in the city with my wife and my kids. But soon after I had become a ritualist as my father was, I then made that decision to create an environment in which my wife could not even understand why each and every day we were fighting like that. But the reason why I had created such a toxic environment in our marriage for me and my wife, it was because I wanted my wife to be put in a situation that she was going to force herself to divorce me. But I did this so as to protect my wife and kids from the harm that was going to come to them. So I had to hurt her in order to protect my family. Before my father passed away, he went missing for a couple of weeks, and I was later told that it was his own ritual items that had taken him to a place where no one knew where he had gone. But me, my mother, and my father's witch doctor and his other best friend, we were the ones that knew that when my father had gone missing, it was because he had been taken by his spiritual rats to whatever place they had taken him. When my father passed away, my mother and my father's best friend, we then organized that we had to go and trap field mice, because we had to bury my father with the field mice inside his coffin, and this had to be done in secret without the knowledge of the other relatives that were gathered at my father's funeral. My father's best friend was the one who then inserted the field mice into my late father's coffin without anyone that was present at the burial of my father ever noticing that my father, when we buried him, there was a mouse inside his coffin. After his burial, another secret ceremony had to be performed. This ceremony that we performed, none of my relatives ever knew that we performed this ceremony, because after we had buried my father, we then sat down as a family and we had a family meeting whereby we divided the clothes that had once belonged to my father, and I was given this other metallic trunk that my father had been given by this other white man that he used to work for. And inside that metallic trunk, that was where all of the ritual items were. And that trunk, it is more like a home to the rats that were left behind for me by my father. After we had all gone back to our homes, then my mom told me that we were supposed to perform this ceremony, and my mom told me that the traditional healer was going to perform this ceremony on my behalf. So the amount of money that this traditional healer wanted was supposed to be equivalent to what a cow was worth back in those days. After I had worked so hard for that money, and when I had budgeted the money, I then chose to return back to the village so that my mom, me, and that traditional healer, we can then do that secret ceremony. When I traveled back to that village, we did that ceremony so that those ritualistic rats could then be transferred to me from my dead father. And already I had been given a metallic trunk that is like now a home to these spiritual rats. The rules that I have to follow is that at all times I have to make sure that this metallic trunk should be kept in the darkness. That metallic trunk should never be put into the light. So usually in my bedroom, I do not switch on the light in fear of breaking this rule. But as for my mother, I do not know where she went wrong with these rituals, because after breaking her own set of rules, my mother died, and she had quite a very painful death. By the time that she died, my mom, she had deep wounds. These deep wounds, they were caused from the constant bites that she was receiving from all of these spiritual rats that were eating her alive. But whenever these rats would be eating my mother up alive, it was me and my mother who could only see these rats as they were busy biting her. The other relatives that were present, they could not even see, because they were not spiritually able to see these rats that were eating her alive. When my mother died, her stomach had such a terrible wound. After her death, I then continued with my father's work, but these rats, they require blood, but they do not require this blood always. But when they want the blood, they want this sacrifice to be only done in the month of January. Like my father, he died in the month of January. Just before January could end, that was when my father died. Same as my mother. She also died in the month of January, just like the rest of my relatives whom my father and I have sacrificed. They all die in the month of January. Like if January comes to pass without death in the family, then I will know that none of my relatives will die throughout the year. These sacrifices are not required like each and every year, but whenever these rats require this blood, because they only survive on human blood, then the sacrifice has to be made. After some time, those rats then required that I give them a man and a woman. The man that I was going to give to them to be a spiritual husband, the woman that I would give to these spiritual rats to become a spiritual wife to these rats. So I selected two of my relatives, a man and a woman. As for the woman, I had been told where I would find her undergarments, because my mom, she was the one who took care of her from a very young age. So my mom told me that when she was raising her, she had taken that opportunity to steal some of my cousin sister's underwear, and she had hidden them in a place that no one was going to find them. Before she died, she told me where I was supposed to find these underwears that had been stolen from my cousin sister. by my mom. That is how I sacrificed these relatives of mine. For them, they are not supposed to die, but they have to live a life of serving these spiritual rats and to be married to these spiritual rats, such that they are not allowed to enter into any physical relationships or to enter into any physical marriages, because they are already married off in the spirit to these spiritual rats. Dear listeners, right there was a message that I received. Then we had to try as much as we could to give you the translation of that story. Your strange things do happen in this world. You'll be going around asking yourself why you can't find love in this world, yet you'll be married off to a rat. African magic for you.